It all started when I moved into my new apartment. I had just broken up with my long-term girlfriend and needed a fresh start. The place wasn't anything fancy, just a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building, and the rent was cheap, which was exactly what I needed at the time. The first few weeks were normal. I spent my nights watching TV, scrolling through my phone, and occasionally going out with friends. But one night, things took a strange turn. It was around 3 a.m. when my phone rang. I was half asleep and didn't recognize the number. At first, I ignored it, but the ringing didn't stop. Annoyed, I picked up the phone. "Hello," I muttered, still groggy. There was silence on the other end. No breathing, no background noise, just complete silence. "Hello? Who is this?" I said again, but no response. I hung up and went back to sleep, assuming it was a wrong number. But the next night, at exactly 3 a.m., the same thing happened. My phone rang from an unknown number. This time I felt uneasy. I picked up the call, but again, there was no sound. Just silence. I tried blocking the number, but it didn't work. The calls kept coming every single night at the same time, 3 a.m. I even changed my number, but somehow, the calls followed me. One night, after a particularly stressful day at work, I decided to answer the call and not hang up. I held the phone to my ear, waiting for something, anything. After nearly a minute of silence, I heard a whisper, "Don't look outside." A chill ran down my spine. My apartment had a small window near my bed, and suddenly, I felt a heavy weight in my chest. I didn't want to look, but the curiosity was unbearable. Slowly, I turned my head towards the window. Nothing, just the empty street below. I sighed in relief, thinking it was just a prank. But just as I was about to turn back, I noticed something strange. There was a man standing under the streetlight right across the street. He was tall, wearing a black hoodie, and staring directly at my window. My heart started racing. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just a random guy. But then, as if he could hear my thoughts, he raised his hand and waved. I immediately dropped my phone. My hands were shaking, my body frozen. The call had ended, but my phone started ringing again almost immediately. I didn't answer this time. Instead, I slowly peeked out of my window again. He was gone. I stayed up all night, barely blinking. I even considered calling the police, but what would I say? A man waved at me from across the street? That sounded ridiculous. The next night, I decided to be prepared. I kept my phone's camera open, ready to record if it happened again. And sure enough, at exactly 3 a.m., the call came. My heart was pounding as I picked it up. Again, the same whisper, "Don't look outside." This time, I hit the record button on my phone and slowly turned towards the window. He was there again. Same spot. Same clothes. Same blank stare. But this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. There were now 2 more people standing next to him, both wearing the same black hoodie, both staring at me. Panic took over. I immediately called the police, barely able to speak. "There are people outside my apartment watching me. Please, send someone now." The operator asked for my address and assured me someone was on the way. I stayed on the line, staring at the figures below. But within seconds, they all turned and walked away into the darkness. By the time the police arrived, there was no one there. They checked the area, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. One officer asked if I had any enemies, someone who might want to scare me. I told them no, I wasn't involved in anything shady. I even showed them the video, but the recording was blank. No figures, no movement, just the empty street. I felt like I was losing my mind. After that night, the calls stopped. I never received another one, and I never saw those figures again. But I still can't shake the feeling that they were watching me for a reason, that they wanted something. Even now, years later, I still wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, expecting my phone to ring. And sometimes, I feel like someone is standing outside my window watching. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store. It wasn't the best job, but it paid the bills. My shifts usually started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m., and since the store was in a quiet area, I spent most nights alone. One night, around 2:30 a.m., the store was completely empty. I was sitting behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when the store's landline phone rang. It was unusual. No one ever called the store that late. I answered, "Hello, this is Quickmart. How can I help you?" At first, I heard nothing, just static. Then a woman's voice whispered, "He's watching you." I froze. "Excuse me? Who is this?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The line went dead. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was a prank. Maybe some bored teenagers messing around. But something about the voice bothered me. It sounded too calm, too deliberate. I stood up and glanced around the store. The glass entrance door gave me a clear view of the parking lot, which was completely empty. The security cameras showed no movement outside. Still, I felt uneasy. About 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, I hesitated before answering. "Hello." Silence. Then the same whisper. "He's inside now." A cold chill ran down my spine. My eyes darted around the store. No one was there, or at least no one I could see. I grabbed the store's emergency flashlight and slowly walked out from behind the counter. My heart was pounding. I checked the aisles one by one, shining the light into every corner. Nothing. But when I turned back towards the counter, I noticed something strange. The storage room door at the back of the store was slightly open. I knew for a fact that I had locked it at the start of my shift. My hands were shaking as I walked toward it, my flashlight flickering slightly. I reached out, slowly pushing the door open. The room was dark, filled with stacked boxes and cleaning supplies. I stepped inside, my breath shaky. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost screamed. With my hands shaking, I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A known number calling. I backed away from the storage room and declined the call. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I ran back to the counter, locked the front door, and checked the security cameras again. Still, no one was there. The rest of the night was uneventful, but I couldn't stop thinking about those calls. The voice. The message. "He's watching you. He's inside now." Was it just a prank? Or was there really someone in the store, hiding, watching me? By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted but relieved to get out of there. As soon as my replacement arrived, I grabbed my stuff and walked out without looking back. But as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed one last time. A text message from the same unknown number. Said, "See you tomorrow." I work as a night shift taxi driver in a quiet town. I've seen all kinds of people, drunk businessmen, exhausted nurses, and the occasional lost tourist. But there's one ride I'll never forget. It was a cold winter night, around 2 a.m., and I was parked near a gas station, waiting for a new fare. The roads were empty, and everything was silent except for the occasional car passing by. Then, my phone buzzed with a new ride request. The pickup location was an old, abandoned gas station about 10 minutes away. I hesitated. That place had been shut down for years. Why would someone be there at this hour? But a fare was a fare, so I accepted and drove towards the location. As I pulled up, I saw a woman standing near the old gas pumps. She was wearing a black dress, and her long, dark hair covered most of her face. Her posture was stiff, almost unnatural. I rolled down the window. "Did you call a taxi?" She nodded and got into the back seat without saying a word. Her presence made me uncomfortable. There was something off about her. I glanced at the mirror. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting in her lap. "Where to?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. She whispered an address, a place on the outskirts of town. It wasn't far, so I started driving. The entire ride was silent. No small talk, no phone scrolling, nothing. Just her sitting there, staring straight ahead. After about 5 minutes, my unease grew stronger. The air in the car felt colder. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. She was gone. The seat was empty. I slammed the brakes, my heart racing. I turned around, but there was no one there. The car doors had never opened. The seatbelt was still buckled, but she had vanished. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what just happened. Then suddenly my phone buzzed again. A message from the same ride request. "Thank you for the ride." I stared at my screen, my hands trembling. I checked the passenger records in my taxi app. No ride history. No proof that I had picked anyone up. I quickly turned the car around and sped back into town, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? Had I been driving alone this whole time? The next morning, I told a friend what happened. He went pale and asked me for the exact location where I had picked her up. When I told him, he let out a slow breath. "That's where a woman died in a hit-and-run accident 5 years ago," he said. "The driver never stopped. They say she still waits there, trying to get home. I haven't driven at night since."